David Chen had been awake for approximately 19 hours, fueled by synthetic coffee and the kind of stubborn determination that kept atmospheric processors running when they'd rather explode, when he took the wrong turn that changed his life. New Geneva Station's corridors had been designed by someone who clearly believed that navigation should be a philosophical challenge rather than a practical necessity. And exhaustion had finally overwhelmed his ability to interpret the color-coded guide strips that supposedly led somewhere logical. Section 12, Subsection C, Engineering Access Point. Gamma. David squinted at his work tablet, comparing the location markers with what appeared to be a corridor that existed in more dimensions than strictly necessary. Or possibly Gamma Prime. Or maybe I'm hallucinating from caffeine overdose. The door he chose opened onto something that definitely wasn't an engineering access point. The chamber beyond was a sphere carved from what looked like crystallized starlight, its walls displaying holographic data streams that flowed like liquid information through three-dimensional space. At the room's center sat a meditation alcove surrounded by floating displays showing star charts, treaty documents, and classified information that made David's security clearance look like a library card. And in that alcove, apparently waiting for him, was an alien woman whose presence turned his confusion into something approaching panic. She was beautiful in the way that made David's engineering-trained mind immediately catalog the impossibility of her being there. Elegant features that could have graced classical sculptures, silver hair that seemed to catch and reflect light that wasn't actually present, and violet eyes that suggested depths his atmospheric processor manuals hadn't prepared him to navigate. Her only obviously non-human feature was the pointed ears that rose through her hair like architectural details, designed by someone with excellent taste and access to superior genetics. David said, his brain struggling to process the situation while his security training screamed warnings about unauthorized access to classified areas during sensitive diplomatic negotiations. I think I'm in the wrong room. She looked up at him with the kind of smile that suggested she'd been expecting this exact conversation, at this exact moment, in this exact place that he definitely wasn't supposed to be. I know, she replied with calm certainty that made David's stomach drop. You know I'm in the wrong room, or you know something else that I really don't want to hear about. Both probably. She gestured to the floating displays around them. Please sit, we have much to discuss. David looked around the chamber, noting details that his engineering background flagged as impossible. The holographic systems were operating without visible power sources. The data streams were displaying information at resolutions that exceeded current display technology, and the crystalline walls seemed to be actively processing information rather than simply reflecting it. I really should go, he said, backing toward the door. I was just looking for the environmental control junction, and this is obviously some sort of classified archival area that I definitely don't have clearance for. David Chen, engineering specialist, level 7 clearance, assigned to atmospheric processing systems maintenance. Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, musical but edged with something that suggested authority beyond her apparent age. 34 hours of overtime logged this week, mostly dealing with processor efficiency anomalies that shouldn't exist according to manufacturer specifications. How do you know that? Because your presence here is not accidental, despite what you might think. She stood, moving with fluid grace that made the impossible technology around them seem like a natural extension of her presence. My name is Solara Velen. I am the keeper of the hidden archives, and you, David Chen, have just activated the hidden witness right. The what right? An ancient protocol that bonds unauthorized witnesses to the keeper of classified information, making them provisional consorts with shared responsibility for protecting sensitive data. Solara approached one of the data streams, her fingers dancing through holographic interfaces with practiced ease. By entering this chamber and witnessing its contents, You have become legally bound to assist in safeguarding information that affects the survival of 3 species. David felt his brain attempt to process this information and come up empty. Legally bound how? Exactly. Because I'm pretty sure I didn't sign anything when I got lost in your impossible architecture. The bond is automatic when certain conditions are met: unauthorized access, visual confirmation of classified data, and acceptance of the keeper's presence. Celara's smile grew slightly wider. You sat down when I asked you to. That constitutes acceptance under the protocols. I haven't sat down yet. No, but you're going to. Because you're an engineer, and engineers can't resist investigating systems that operate beyond their understanding. She gestured to the floating displays. And what you're seeing here operates very far beyond anyone's understanding. David looked at the data streams flowing around him, his professional curiosity warring with his survival instincts. The information displays were showing technical specifications for atmospheric processors that matched the ones he'd been maintaining, but with modifications that weren't in any manual he'd ever read. Those are my processors, he said, moving closer despite his better judgment. But these readings, these efficiency curves are impossible. You can't get atmospheric recycling performance like this without additional power sources that don't exist in our installation schematics. Because the processors have been modified beyond their official specifications, Celara said quietly. Modified to do things that atmospheric processing systems were never designed to do. David studied the data, his engineering mind automatically analyzing the technical impossibilities displayed before him. These modifications would require access to the primary systems during construction, comprehensive knowledge of atmospheric chemistry, and he paused, the implications hitting him, and specific intent to alter the atmospheric composition in ways that would affect cognitive function. Very good. Now you begin to understand why the hidden witness right exists. Someone's been drugging the station's air supply. Someone's been ensuring that diplomatic negotiations always end in hostility rather than progress. Trace amounts of aggression enhancers, distributed through the atmospheric recycling systems, activated during key treaty discussions. Celara's expression grew grim. The ceasefire negotiations aren't failing because our species are incompatible. They're failing because corporate interests have been artificially manufacturing the conditions for continued conflict. David sank into the meditation alcove seating, his legs suddenly unsteady as the scope of what she was telling him became clear. You're talking about sabotage, systematic manipulation of an entire peace process. I'm talking about corporate war profiteering on a galactic scale. And you, David Chen, have just become the witness whose testimony can expose it. The chamber's lighting shifted, and David realized that the crystalline walls weren't just decorative. They were recording everything, creating a permanent record of his presence and his growing understanding of the conspiracy he'd stumbled into. What happens now? He asked, though he was beginning to suspect that his quiet career maintaining atmospheric processors had just become significantly more complicated. Now, Celara said, settling beside him in the alcove, we decide whether you're ready to become a keeper of secrets that could save 3 species from a war they don't want, or whether I need to find a way to make you forget everything you've just learned. Outside the chamber, David could hear the subtle hum of atmospheric processors continuing their work, blissfully unaware that they'd been turned into weapons of war. Inside, surrounded by impossible technology and classified information that could rewrite the balance of power across star systems, he realized that getting lost had been the most important navigation error of his life. The question was whether it would also be the last mistake he'd live to regret. The good news, Celara said, activating a holographic display that made David's work tablet look like a stone tablet, is that the hidden witness right comes with excellent benefits: enhanced security clearance, access to archives spanning 3 civilizations, and diplomatic immunity that covers most forms of accidental treason. Accidental treason. David watched data streams cascade around him, showing financial records and communication logs that definitely weren't meant for his security level. That's supposed to be good news. But the bad news is that those benefits come with responsibilities that most people find overwhelming, and enemies who prefer their witnesses significantly less alive. Celara gestured to a particular data stream that showed shipping manifests with corporate logos David recognized. Also, the provisional bond can only be dissolved within 72 hours, after which it becomes permanent regardless of your preference in the matter. David studied the financial records flowing past, his engineering mind automatically identifying patterns that painted a picture he really didn't want to see. These shipping records, they're showing weapons deliveries to all 3 sides of the conflict, from the same suppliers: Meridian Corporation, Helix Industries, and Quantum Solutions. 3 different corporate entities that happen to share the same board of directors and the same profit model. Celara highlighted connections between the financial data that revealed a web of corporate manipulation spanning multiple star systems. They've been playing our species against each other for 18 months, ensuring that every peace negotiation fails and military contracts remain profitable. But why modify the atmospheric processors? Why not just lobby against the peace process through normal political channels? Because normal political channels require public debate, and public debate might lead people to ask inconvenient questions about who benefits from continued warfare. Celara pulled up technical specifications that made David's stomach sink. Atmospheric manipulation is invisible, deniable, and creates the exact psychological conditions needed to ensure diplomatic failure. David examined the processor modifications, noting design elements that were both elegant and horrifying. These chemical additives, they're designed to enhance territorial aggression while suppressing empathy and cooperation. Anyone breathing this modified atmosphere would be predisposed to interpret diplomatic overtures as threats, which explains why every negotiation session has ended with someone storming out in anger, despite all 3 species genuinely wanting peace. Celara's expression grew thoughtful. The question is what we do with this information now that you've witnessed it. We report it to station security and let the proper authorities handle the investigation. Station security includes at least 3 individuals whose financial records show direct payments from the smuggling cabal. The proper authorities have been compromised from the beginning. Celara stood and began pacing, her movements fluid despite the obvious weight of the situation. The hidden witness right exists precisely because normal channels of justice can be corrupted, bought, or eliminated. David looked around the chamber, noting details that his engineering training flagged as significant. This room, it's not just an archive, is it? It's a backup system, a way to preserve critical information, even if the official records are destroyed. Very good. The hidden archives maintain independent copies of all treaty negotiations, financial transactions, and technical specifications related to interspecies relations. Information that can't be altered, deleted, or suppressed by corporate interests. And the hidden witness right ensures that there's always someone with legal standing to present that information in court, even if the original keepers are eliminated. Celara's voice grew quiet. 3 previous archive keepers have died under suspicious circumstances in the past year. Car accidents, atmospheric system failures, sudden illnesses that couldn't be treated. David felt the weight of responsibility settling around him like a particularly expensive and dangerous coat. So by stumbling into this room, I've become your backup plan. You've become my partner, if you choose to formalize the bond. Celara activated another display showing legal documents that hurt David's head to read. The provisional bond grants temporary access and basic protection. The formal bond makes you a permanent co-keeper of the archives, with all the authority and targets that entails. Targets, people who profit from war, don't appreciate having their business model exposed by inconvenient witnesses. Celara's smile held no humor. The formal bond would make you essentially immune to legal prosecution, but it wouldn't make you immune to corporate assassination, accidental atmospheric system failures, or sudden health crises that can't be treated by conventional medicine. David studied the legal documents, noting clauses that seemed to have been written by someone with a very thorough understanding of both interspecies law and the creative ways that inconvenient people could be eliminated. What happens if I choose not to formalize the bond? Then in 72 hours, your memory of this conversation and everything you've seen is chemically suppressed. You're returned to your normal duties, and I continue looking for someone else who might stumble into the archives at a convenient moment. And the conspiracy continues until someone with the courage to act stumbles into the right room at the right time. Celara's expression grew serious. Or until the ceasefire collapses entirely and three species destroy each other for corporate profit margins. The chamber's lighting shifted again, and David realized that the crystalline walls were responding to their conversation, recording not just words but emotional resonance and decision-making processes. Whatever choice he made would become part of the permanent record. How many people know about the hidden archives? Currently, you, me, and whoever's been monitoring unauthorized access to this section of the station. Celara activated a security display that made David's blood chill. 3 separate individuals have attempted to access this chamber since you arrived. None of them are authorized to be in this section. The conspirators, most likely, which means our timeline just became significantly shorter. Celara began activating what appeared to be defensive protocols, and the chamber's walls began displaying warning indicators in languages David didn't recognize. The provisional bond gives you basic protection, but if those individuals gain access to this chamber, they'll try to eliminate both of us before the formal bond can be completed. David looked at the security displays showing the approaching unauthorized personnel, then at the archives containing evidence that could expose a galactic conspiracy, then at the alien woman whose calm competence in the face of imminent danger was either very reassuring or deeply terrifying. So my choices are formalize the bond and become a permanent target for corporate assassination, or have my memory wiped and let 3 species destroy each other while war profiteers get rich. Those are the practical options, yes. Well, David said, standing and moving toward the legal documentation interface. When you put it like that, it's really not much of a choice at all. As he prepared to activate the formal bonding protocols that would permanently link his fate to the preservation of interspecies peace, David reflected that his career guidance counselors had never mentioned that atmospheric processing expertise might lead to accidentally becoming a keeper of galactic secrets. Though given his luck with navigation, he probably should have seen something like this coming. The formal bonding interface looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that legal documents should be both aesthetically pleasing and capable of withstanding cosmic radiation, corporate lawyers, and the kind of bureaucratic challenges that span star systems. David placed his hand on the crystalline scanner, feeling quantum resonance patterns encoding his genetic signature into systems that had been waiting centuries for activation. Before you complete the process, Celara said, her voice carrying new harmonics that David's enhanced hearing could suddenly parse as emotional undertones. There's something else you should know about the conspiracy. More good news about corporate assassination attempts. The atmospheric modifications aren't limited to this station. The smuggling cabal has been installing similar systems in diplomatic facilities across 12 sectors. Celara activated a galactic map that showed the scope of the manipulation in terrifying detail. Every major peace negotiation in the past 2 years has been compromised by artificial aggression enhancement. David studied the map, his engineering mind automatically calculating the technical requirements for such a widespread operation. This would require hundreds of modified processors, coordinated installation across multiple jurisdictions, and access to atmospheric systems during construction phases. We're not talking about a simple smuggling operation. This is systematic manipulation of interspecies relations on a galactic scale, which is why the hidden witness right exists. Normal investigative channels can't address conspiracy that spans multiple governments and involves corruption at the highest levels. Celara's expression grew grim. The formal bond doesn't just make you a keeper of these archives. It makes you a roving inspector with authority to investigate atmospheric tampering anywhere in charted space. A roving inspector, with diplomatic immunity, access to classified technical specifications, and the legal standing to override local authorities when corporate interests have compromised normal oversight. She gestured to documents that were materializing around the bonding interface. Also, hazard pay equivalent to a small planetary budget and life insurance policies that cover death by exotic poisoning, atmospheric sabotage, and accidentally discovering inconvenient truths. David looked at the contract terms scrolling past in multiple languages, noting clauses that suggested previous hidden witnesses had faced challenges considerably more complex than routine atmospheric maintenance. How many roving inspectors are currently active? After the recent accidents and mysterious illnesses, just me, and soon, if you complete the bonding, you. 2 people to investigate galactic-scale atmospheric sabotage. 2 people with unlimited access to classified archives, diplomatic immunity, and the authority to conscript local engineering support anywhere our investigation leads. Celara's smile returned, though it held edges that suggested the job came with unusual hazards. Also, quantum-encrypted communication systems that can't be intercepted by corporate intelligence, and emergency evacuation protocols that can extract us from hostile situations faster than most beings can process betrayal. The bonding interface chimed, indicating that David's genetic signature had been successfully integrated into the archive systems. Around them, the chamber's displays began showing new data streams as his security clearance updated in real time to include access levels that probably violated several international treaties. The technical evidence you'll need to expose the atmospheric sabotage is now available, Celara said, gesturing to engineering specifications that made David's previous work look like basic maintenance. But there's one more thing the formal bond grants that you should understand before you make the final commitment. More roving inspector responsibilities. Shared memory access to all previous hidden witnesses. Every investigation, every discovery, every technique for identifying atmospheric tampering that's been developed over the past 3 centuries. She touched the interface beside his hand. You'll have the accumulated expertise of everyone who's held this position, but you'll also have their memories of what happens to people who threaten corporate profit margins. David felt the quantum resonance intensifying, awareness of additional minds touching his consciousness with information that would take years to process through normal learning. Shared memory access. That's going to take some getting used to. Most new witnesses find the adjustment challenging, yes. Though the previous witnesses report that having centuries of investigative experience becomes quite useful when corporate assassins start getting creative. Corporate assassins, David repeated, feeling the weight of 300 years of dangerous knowledge settling into his mind. Right, just another occupational hazard. The chamber's security systems activated with urgent harmonics as unauthorized access attempts reached critical levels. On the displays, David could see 3 figures in corporate security uniforms approaching the chamber's entrance with equipment that looked considerably more lethal than standard investigation tools. Decision time, Selara said, her hand moving to controls that would either complete the bonding process or initiate emergency memory suppression. Formal hidden witness with authority to expose galactic conspiracy, and a life expectancy measured in years rather than hours. Or memory wipe, and a return to normal atmospheric maintenance with a life expectancy of approximately 10 minutes once those security personnel realize what you've witnessed. David looked at the approaching corporate security team, then at the archive systems showing evidence of manipulation that affected billions of lives across dozens of star systems, then at the alien woman whose calm competence suggested she'd been preparing for this exact situation for quite some time. "You know," he said, activating the final bonding protocols, "for someone who claims I stumbled into this chamber accidentally, you seem remarkably well prepared for my arrival." The hidden archives have been monitoring atmospheric system anomalies for months. When the same engineer kept logging overtime hours investigating efficiency discrepancies that shouldn't exist, it became clear that someone with the right combination of technical expertise and moral integrity was getting close to discovering the truth. Selara's smile grew wider as the formal bonding completed, and David felt his consciousness expand to include centuries of investigative knowledge. "Your accidental discovery was carefully orchestrated to occur at the exact moment when we needed a witness with legal standing to expose the conspiracy. So you've been manipulating me. I've been hoping you'd prove worthy of the responsibility. There's a difference." The chamber's defenses activated as the corporate security team reached the entrance, energy barriers crackling to life, while automated systems began documenting their unauthorized access attempt for legal proceedings. David found himself accessing memories that weren't his own, drawing on investigative techniques developed by previous hidden witnesses who'd faced similar challenges. "All right," he said, feeling strange competence settle over him as the shared memories integrated with his engineering expertise. "Let's go catch some atmospheric saboteurs and save a few species from corporate manufactured warfare." "Welcome to the Hidden Witness Corps," Selara replied, activating protocols that would broadcast their evidence across the galaxy while simultaneously documenting the corporate security team's assassination attempt. "Try not to let the galactic scope of the responsibility overwhelm your sense of humor. Previous witnesses report that laughing at the absurdity of the situation helps with stress management during interstellar conspiracy investigations." As emergency broadcasts began exposing the atmospheric sabotage to diplomatic corps across 3 star systems, David realized that his career change from maintaining life support equipment to maintaining interspecies peace was about to become very interesting, and possibly very short-lived, if the corporate security team's equipment was as lethal as his newly acquired memories suggested. The first shot from the corporate security team's plasma rifles struck the chamber's entrance just as David finished uploading the atmospheric sabotage evidence to every diplomatic facility in known space. The energy barriers held, but the crystal walls began displaying damage assessments that suggested their protection wouldn't last indefinitely. "How long do we have?" David asked, accessing memories from previous hidden witnesses who dealt with similar assassination attempts while trying not to think about how many of those memories ended badly. "Long enough to complete the evidence broadcast, not long enough for a leisurely evacuation," Selara replied, her fingers dancing across control interfaces with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd been planning for this contingency. "Though there is one option that might give us the time we need." "I'm listening." "The atmospheric processors you've been maintaining. They're connected to the station's emergency systems. If we can reverse the chemical modifications and flood the corridors with concentrated empathy enhancers instead of aggression boosters, we might be able to convince our attackers to reconsider their career choices." David accessed his newly acquired knowledge of atmospheric sabotage techniques, cross-referencing them with his practical experience maintaining the station's processors. It's possible, but I'd need direct access to the primary atmospheric control junction. And that junction is currently between us and 3 armed corporate killers who probably won't appreciate the irony of being defeated by weaponized emotional manipulation. Actually, Selara said with a smile that suggested she'd been looking forward to this moment, the hidden archives have been secretly connected to the atmospheric control systems since their installation. We can implement the modifications from here. Connected how? Emergency override protocols installed by previous hidden witnesses who believed that sometimes the best defense against corporate aggression is a sudden outbreak of corporate empathy. She activated systems that David's engineering training told him shouldn't exist. Also, the atmospheric processors have been recording baseline emotional profiles for every individual on the station. We can target the empathy enhancement specifically to individuals whose current emotional state includes intent to commit murder for corporate profit. David watched in fascination as his carefully maintained atmospheric systems transformed from life support equipment into precision psychological warfare devices. This is either the most elegant application of atmospheric engineering I've ever seen, or the most terrifying abuse of environmental control systems in recorded history. Why not both? The chamber's defenses began failing as the corporate security team's weapons overwhelmed the energy barriers, but their assault slowed noticeably as the modified atmospheric mix reached the corridor outside. Through the security monitors, David could see the attackers beginning to look confused, their aggressive postures shifting to something approaching contemplative uncertainty. The empathy enhancers are working, Selara observed. They're starting to question whether murdering witnesses to corporate conspiracy is really the best use of their professional skills. How long before the effects wear off? Long enough for station security to arrive and arrest them for attempted assassination, but not long enough for us to complete the full evidence broadcast. Selara activated new protocols that made the chamber's displays show real-time updates from diplomatic facilities across the galaxy. The good news is that our evidence upload has triggered investigations on 47 worlds. The bad news is that we've also triggered corporate crisis management protocols that will try to eliminate all evidence and witnesses before the investigations can proceed. David watched the incoming reports, noting that his atmospheric expertise was being requested by investigative teams who discovered similar sabotage in their own facilities. It looks like we're going to be very busy roving inspectors. If we survive the next few hours, yes. Selara began activating what appeared to be emergency evacuation systems. The immediate priority is getting off this station before corporate crisis management decides that eliminating the entire facility is easier than hunting down specific witnesses. Eliminate the entire station. Atmospheric system malfunctions that result in explosive decompression are surprisingly common when corporate conspiracies are exposed. Very difficult to investigate when all the evidence gets sucked into space along with the witnesses. David accessed memories from previous hidden witnesses, finding detailed records of similar scenarios that ended with entire facilities being destroyed to eliminate inconvenient evidence. Right, time to go. The evacuation proceeded with the kind of efficiency that suggested it had been planned well in advance. Emergency protocols activated, granting them access to hidden transport systems that connected the hidden archives to private evacuation routes. Within minutes, they were aboard a ship that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood that roving inspectors might need to leave dangerous situations very quickly. Where to first? David asked as they cleared the station's defensive perimeter and watched New Geneva Station's diplomatic facilities beginning emergency lockdown procedures. 12 sectors worth of atmospheric sabotage seems like a lot of territory to cover. We start with the facilities where the modifications are newest, work backward through the installation timeline, and hope we stay ahead of the corporate cleanup teams. Cellara activated navigation systems that showed their first destination. Also, we send very polite messages to local authorities warning them that anyone who tries to eliminate evidence of atmospheric tampering will be charged with conspiracy to commit genocide. Genocide. Systematic manipulation of atmospheric systems designed to prevent interspecies peace negotiations qualifies under galactic law. Very serious charges, very unpleasant penalties, very effective deterrent against corporate interference with our investigation. David studied the navigation display, noting that their itinerary would take them to some of the most politically sensitive locations in charted space. This is going to be interesting. Most previous hidden witnesses report that interesting is an inadequate description for the experience of investigating galactic-scale corporate conspiracy while trying to avoid assassination by the people you're investigating. What do they report instead? Terrifying, impossible, and surprisingly educational, Cellara said with a grin. Also, romantically complicated when working closely with another hidden witness whose species has very different ideas about personal space and appropriate expressions of professional partnership. David looked at her, noting details that his enhanced awareness was suddenly flagging as significant. Are you saying that the hidden witness right includes relationship complications? I'm saying that spending months investigating atmospheric sabotage, while trying to avoid corporate assassination tends to create emotional bonds that transcend species barriers and professional protocols. Her violet eyes held depths that suggested those complications might not be entirely unwelcome. Previous witnesses report that shared memories and mutual responsibility for preserving galactic peace can lead to unexpected emotional developments. Unexpected emotional developments, David repeated, feeling warmth that had nothing to do with atmospheric processing and everything to do with the possibility that his accidental stumble into the hidden archives might have led him to something considerably more valuable than just a career change. 6 months later, as David reviewed atmospheric integrity reports from their latest investigation, while Cellara cross-referenced financial records in their shared workspace aboard the hidden witness ship Veritas, he reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd started as someone who fixed air recycling systems and ended up as someone who fixed interspecies relations by exposing the corporate manipulation that had been preventing galactic peace. The work was more complex now, involving diplomatic protocols that spanned star systems and technical specifications that included emotional resonance requirements. But at its core, it was still the same job he'd always done, identifying what was broken, figuring out how to fix it, and making sure it worked better than it had before. The only difference was that now, broken meant systematic corporate sabotage of atmospheric systems designed to prevent peace. And fixing it involved collaborating with someone whose ideas about proper investigative technique included shared memory access, and whose species' approach to partnership made human relationship conventions seem remarkably straightforward. And sometimes, when they weren't too busy exposing galactic conspiracies or avoiding corporate assassination attempts, it involved quiet conversations about the technical poetry of properly balanced atmospheric systems and the unexpected emotional developments that could arise when two people from different species shared the responsibility for protecting something larger than themselves. David Chen had always been good at maintaining life support systems. He just never imagined that the most important life support work of his career would involve maintaining the conditions necessary for entire civilizations to trust each other enough to choose peace over profit.